For years, you've probably heard that the key to a long life is eating right, exercising regularly, and avoiding smoking. And all of that matters. But here's the finding that surprised me most when I first came across it. The single strongest predictor of how long you'll live and how healthy your later years will be isn't cholesterol levels or blood pressure. It's the quality of your relationships. A 75-year Harvard study followed hundreds of men from adolescence all the way into their 90s, and the conclusion was unequivocal. Good relationships keep us healthier and happier. Period. And those who were socially isolated experienced a decline in health earlier and lived shorter lives. Welcome to Longevity Lab. I'm Claire.
And I'm Robert. Claire, this one already sounds like it's going to change something I do every day. I mean, I've been focused on my diet, my exercise, my sleep. I track all of it, but I never once thought, am I lonely enough that it's going to kill me? That sounds dramatic, but you're telling me the research actually says that.
It does. And Robert, I want to be really clear about what the research says and what it doesn't say. This isn't about blaming people who live alone or who are naturally introverted. Being alone and feeling lonely are two very different things. The Harvard study found that it's the subjective experience of loneliness, feeling disconnected even when you're around people. That has the most damaging biological effects, and the data is striking. Social isolation increases your risk of premature death by 29%. That's comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
15 cigarettes a day. That's a pack and a half. I mean, I gave up smoking 20 years ago because I knew it was the single worst thing I could do for my health. And you're saying loneliness is in the same ballpark.
That's exactly what the meta-analyses show. A 2015 review published in Perspectives on Psychological Science analyzed data from over 300,000 participants and found that social isolation, loneliness, and living alone were each associated with a 29 to 32% increase in mortality. The researchers compared that to well-established risk factors. The effect was comparable to smoking and exceeded the impact of obesity and physical inactivity.
So the common advice we've all heard for decades, eat less, move more, don't smoke. That's all true, but it's not the whole picture. The missing piece is the human connection piece.
Exactly. And the Harvard study I mentioned, the Harvard study of adult development, is probably the longest running study of human happiness and health ever conducted. It started in 1938 and followed 724 men from two groups. One group was Harvard sophomores. The other group was boys from Boston's poorest neighborhoods. The researchers tracked them for their entire lives. They collected data on their health, their careers, their marriages, their friendships, and the director of the study, Dr. Robert Waldinger, summarized the findings in a TED Talk that has been viewed tens of millions of times. The clearest message from the study is this: good relationships keep us happier and healthier. Period.
And look, I'll be honest, I followed the standard health advice myself for years before I read this study. I thought longevity was a math problem. Calories in, calories out, steps per day, hours of sleep. But you're telling me that the strength of my friendships might matter more than my cholesterol numbers?
I wouldn't say they matter more in the sense that cholesterol doesn't matter. It absolutely does. But the research suggests that social connection is an independent risk factor, meaning even if you have perfect cholesterol, ideal blood pressure, a healthy weight, and you exercise regularly, if you're chronically lonely, your health outcomes are still worse than someone with strong social ties who has less than perfect numbers. The effect is that powerful.
Okay, so I need to understand the mechanism here. How does loneliness physically damage your body? Because that's what I struggle with. I understand that smoking introduces carcinogens into my lungs. I understand that sugar spikes my insulin. But how does feeling disconnected from people translate into something like heart disease?
That's the right question. And the mechanism is actually really well understood now. Let me walk you through it. When you experience chronic loneliness, your body perceives it as a threat. Evolutionarily speaking, being isolated from your tribe meant you were vulnerable to predators. So your body activates the stress response. Your cortisol levels rise, your inflammatory markers go up, your blood pressure increases, and your immune system goes into a state of chronic low grade activation.
So my body is essentially stuck in fight or flight mode because my brain thinks there's a saber-toothed tiger outside the cave, when really I'm just sitting alone in my apartment watching TV.
Exactly. And the problem is, this state of chronic stress has profound physiological consequences. Elevated cortisol over long periods damages the hippocampus. That's the part of the brain responsible for memory and learning. Chronic inflammation is linked to everything from cardiovascular disease to type 2 diabetes to dementia. And here's a specific mechanism that might surprise you. Loneliness is associated with shorter telomeres.
Telomeres, those are the caps on the ends of our chromosomes, right? Like the plastic tips on shoelaces.
Perfect analogy. They protect our DNA from damage. Every time a cell divides, telomeres get a little shorter. When they get too short, the cell can't divide anymore, and it either dies or enters a state called senescence. Cellular senescence is a hallmark of aging, and research has shown that people who report high levels of loneliness have significantly shorter telomeres than those with strong social connections. A 2013 study published in Molecular Psychiatry found that the telomere shortening associated with chronic loneliness was equivalent to accelerated aging of about 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years. So loneliness is literally making me age faster at the cellular level.
Correct. And the inverse is also true. Social connection appears to be protective at the cellular level. A 2020 study published in the journal Psychosomatic Medicine found that older adults with strong social networks had longer telomeres and lower levels of inflammatory markers like interleukin 6 and C reactive protein. These are biomarkers that predict everything from cardiovascular events to cognitive decline.
Okay, so I'm convinced, but I think a lot of our listeners are probably thinking what I'm thinking. What does this actually mean for me? Because I'm a 65-year-old man, I have friends, I have a wife, I have adult children, but I also spend a lot of time alone. I work from home. My social life is not what it was 20 years ago. Is that a problem?
And that's such an important question because it gets at the distinction between being alone and feeling lonely. The Harvard study found that it's not the quantity of your relationships that matters most, it's the quality. You can be married and still feel profoundly lonely. You can be surrounded by colleagues and still feel disconnected. And conversely, you can live alone and have rich, fulfilling social connections.
So, what should I be paying attention to? How do I know if my social health is actually a risk factor for me?
There's actually a validated screening tool called the UCLA Loneliness Scale. It's used in research to measure subjective feelings of social isolation. But a simpler way to think about it is this: do you have at least one person in your life with whom you can share your authentic thoughts and feelings without judgment? And do you feel a sense of belonging? That there are people who truly know you and care about you?
So, it's not about having a packed social calendar, it's about depth.
Exactly. And here's what the Blue Zone research adds to this picture. Dan Butner and his team studied the world's longest lived populations. Places like Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, Icaria in Greece, Nicoya in Costa Rica, and Loma Linda in California. And across all 5 blue zones, they found a consistent pattern. These populations had strong social networks that were woven into the fabric of daily life. In Okinawa, they have a concept called moai, a small committed group of friends who support each other for life. In Sardinia, multi generational families live close together. In Nicoya, older adults remain deeply integrated into their communities.
So the key isn't just having friends, it's having a social structure that makes connection inevitable. Like you don't have to schedule connection, it just happens because of how your life is organized.
That's exactly it. And this is where the practical application becomes really actionable. Most of us can't move to a blue zone, but we can look at our own social architecture and make small adjustments. Here's a specific finding. The blue zone research showed that the most powerful social connection for longevity isn't necessarily your family. It's your social circle, the people you spend the most time with. There's a concept called behavioral contagion. Your friends' habits influence your habits. If your close friends smoke, you're more likely to smoke. If they exercise, you're more likely to exercise. If they eat poorly, you're more likely to eat poorly.
So the phrase you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, that's actually backed by research.
It's been studied specifically in the context of health behaviors. A landmark 2007 study published in the New England Journal of Medicine followed over 12,000 participants for 32 years and found that if a person became obese, their friends had a 57% increased chance of becoming obese themselves. The effect was so strong that it extended to 3 degrees of separation. Your friends' friends.
So social connection isn't just a nice to have. It's literally shaping my biology, my behavior, my risks.
And this is why I find this research so empowering rather than frightening. Because unlike your genetics, which you can't change, your social connections are something you can actively cultivate. You can make choices about who you spend time with. You can invest in deepening existing relationships. You can seek out communities that align with your values.
Okay, give me something specific, something I can do this week.
Absolutely. Here are 3 evidence-based actions. Number 1, identify your core social circle. Take 5 minutes and write down the names of the 3 to 5 people who matter most to you. Then ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you had a meaningful conversation with each of them? Not a text exchange, not a quick phone call about logistics. A real conversation where you talked about something that mattered.
I already know the answer for some of them is going to be too long.
And that's valuable information. Number 2, schedule one recurring social commitment. The Blue Zone research found that people in the longest lived communities had social rituals that happened automatically. A weekly dinner with friends, a daily walk with a neighbor, a monthly book club. The key is that it's regular and predictable. You don't have to decide each time whether to show up. It's built into your week.
So instead of saying I should call my friend more, I put it on the calendar 3 weeks from now, Thursday evening, non negotiable.
Exactly. And number 3, join something. A 2018 study published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine found that group based health interventions, things like walking groups, group exercise classes, community gardening, had better adherence and better health outcomes than individual programs. The social accountability and the sense of belonging made people stick with the behavior change.
So I'm not just getting the exercise, I'm getting the social connection that amplifies the benefit.
Correct. And I want to offer one more insight that I think is really important for our audience, especially those who may be older or living alone. The Harvard study found that the quality of relationships in midlife was a stronger predictor of health in later life than just about anything else they measured. People who were satisfied with their relationships at age 50 had better physical and mental health at age 80 than those who were dissatisfied, even after controlling for all the other health factors.
So the work I do on my relationships today is an investment in my health 30 years from now.
Exactly. And I want to be careful here because I don't want anyone listening to feel guilty about being single or living alone. That's not the message. The message is that we all need meaningful connection, and if that's an area where you feel you're falling short, the research says it's worth prioritizing. But if you have health conditions or mobility limitations that make social connection harder, that's a conversation to have with your doctor. There are resources, programs, and support available.
That's really important. And look, Claire, I think what's hitting me hardest about this episode is that I've spent decades optimizing the wrong things. I've been so focused on the tangible metrics, my cholesterol, my weight, my step count, that I completely neglected the intangible, the quality of my friendships, the depth of my conversations, the feeling of belonging.
And I think that's a very common experience. The wellness industry has sold us a very narrow definition of health. It's about what you eat, how you move, what supplements you take, and all of those things matter, but the research is clear that health is broader than that. Mental health isn't separate from physical health, it is health, and social connection is a fundamental pillar.
So, today's rule, what would you say?
Today's rule: your relationships are your biology. Invest in them the way you invest in your diet and your exercise. One meaningful conversation this week, one recurring social commitment, one community you join. That's the prescription.
And I'll add my own personal rule based on what I've learned today. I'm going to call my oldest friend tomorrow, not text him, not email him, call him. And I'm going to suggest we set a weekly phone call, no agenda, just connection.
I think that's a perfect takeaway. And Robert, I want to thank you for bringing that energy to this conversation. I think a lot of our listeners will be inspired to do the same.
This is why I love this show, Claire. Every episode, I come in thinking I understand health, and I walk out realizing I had blind spots I didn't even know existed.
And that's the journey. We're all learning together.
If you found this episode as eye opening as I did, please take a moment to subscribe to Longevity Lab. Share it with someone you care about, because honestly, this might be the most important health conversation you have all week. Hit that like button if you learned something, and leave a comment telling us what surprised you most. We read every single one.
We'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Until then, take care of your body and your connections. They're both keeping you alive.
See you next time.
See you.